everyone, my name is David. Welcome to church number 10 of 52 churches in 52 weeks, round 3. For this video, we're going to wrap up a series of LA church visits by taking a look into traditional Latin Mass at St. Vitus Catholic Church in San Fernando, California, operated by the priestly Fraternity of St. Peter. Now, after attending this service, I didn't know what to talk about. The service was in 3 different languages: Latin, Spanish, and a little bit in English. And I was seated towards the back, so there was parts of it where I wasn't really understanding much. But leaning in afterwards and taking a look into the trending trajectory of the Catholic faith, especially with U.S. demographics, even more so with Hispanic Catholics after a recent report from Pew Research, there is a lot going on here. This parish is relatively new, and having been dedicated to the extraordinary form of Latin Mass, to survive 2020 with the pandemic and the California shutdowns and all of that, most churches were seeing a decline in attendance, obviously. But with St. Vitus Catholic Church, their attendance has ballooned. And as a result, this little area that they purchased in 2018 when they founded this church, they immediately outgrew that. And as a result, the little land that they've had to put a tent over it. And the more Mass services that they have, the more people show up. So what's going on here? And why Latin Mass? Last summer, I did 2 separate Latin Mass visits, both at some very unusual Catholic church experiences. So I drove out to Gower, Missouri, and saw the body of Sister Wilhelmina Lancaster. She was the foundress of this nun convent, and a big part in the curiosity surrounding her was they exhumed her body from her grave, but her body was incorrupt. It hadn't decayed after 4 years. So a big portion of Catholics were wondering if she was a saint, and especially because she stood her ground to maintain Latin Mass, whereas the majority of Catholic churches right now are going for a more modern liturgy. On top of that, afterwards, I went to St. Cantius Catholic Church in downtown Chicago because I had received a number of requests from my Catholic brothers and sisters in Christ to do another video on Latin Mass. And I didn't know it at the time, but the Sunday that I arrived, there was this tour of a relic forearm of St. Jude, the Apostle of the Impossible. And it's interesting because this is the same St. Jude with the namesake for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And obviously, if you've been following this 3rd round, we're doing a fundraiser with St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, trying to raise some money to provide some miracles and provide some healing for families that are going through some very dark times. So as I drive around, we're trying to defeat childhood cancer. Our aim by the 52nd church is to have raised $52,000. As of this recording, we're getting close to $15,000. So to all those Good Samaritans who have prayed or have donated $5, $2, $52, or even more, I want to say thank you very much for all the help and support for some families who can use a helping hand. What proved to be very surprising to me was a subsequent response from Catholic members about their devotion to Latin Mass. So then, as a lifetime Protestant and now having become a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I want to do a little bit of research, like what was going on here, because it felt like there's a little bit of a Catholic schism going on. So what I learned was there was a Second Vatican Council that was organized by a new pope at that time, Pope John XXIII. So he took over, I want to say, when he was 78 years old. So a lot of people were expecting him to be a caretaker pope. But instead, he became very revolutionary by announcing this Second Vatican Council in 1962 because he saw that the church could use some updating for an increasingly secular world. So to do so, he wanted to bring these sweeping reforms to update Catholic liturgy so it wasn't just in Latin Mass, but it also could be done in the vernacular language or the native tongue for wherever that you were. So if you're in the United States, the primary language is English, you can now do Mass in English. Well, there was one Catholic group, the Priestly Fraternity of St. Peter, based in Switzerland. So they were organized in 1988 because they were almost kind of like these Christian perfectionists from what I had read online. So they wanted to maintain Latin Mass. So they have opened up a couple different locations throughout the United States. So this was going to be the very first Priestly Fraternity of St. Peter in LA that would practice and continue with Latin Mass. Well, in July 2021, just 3 years as of this recording, Pope Francis kind of doubled down on the Second Vatican Council and issued a number of sweeping restrictions on Latin Mass. So if a priest wanted to celebrate it, he needed to go to his bishop, who then needed to get permission from the Vatican. So as a result, with the Priestly Fraternity of St. Peter, the next year they sent 2 members to Pope Francis to get permission from him directly to continue with Latin Mass for all their locations. So as a result of these changes, it seems like a consequence has been some discontent within the Catholic faith. And for myself, being an outsider, I don't know the full scope. But from reading comments on my channel, especially with Catholic Mass type of videos, I can't help but sense that discontent for myself. So oddly, after attending 2 prior Latin Mass services, I actually found that I preferred Latin Mass over modern liturgy for where it stands today, because there was just much more mystery to it. There was just much more a sense of bringing in all your senses. So there was this spiritual feeling that I was getting compared to what else is out there. So it's been 60 years since the Second Vatican Council, and Pew Research this past April brought out some really interesting data for where things stand within the U.S. Catholic Church right now. But first, here's a quick minute or two of what Latin Mass looked like at St. Vitus Catholic Church. I'll be back in just a moment to share some more thoughts. After Mass had concluded, I was taking a few pictures outside, and I had a few friends who notified me of this 10-foot tall, towering, iron green colored bell that was towards the side of the road. And coming from the Midwest, I knew nothing about this, but learning a little bit from my friend, like the historical and the church nerd inside of me found this absolutely fascinating. So these mission bells serve as markers for what's known as El Camino Real, also known as the Royal Road or the King's Highway. So it is a historic 600-mile route that dots all 21 Spanish missions. So this stretches from Baja California all the way to Northern California. And this route was used by early Spanish missionaries, soldiers, and citizens. So this route played a significant role in the early development and in the history of California. So early on in the 18th to the 19th century, the Spanish crown was trying to expand and colonize. But at the same point, you had Spanish missionaries who also were entering into the region and were trying to convert the local natives into Catholicism at that time. The idea to add the bells, though, was the idea of Mrs. A.S.C. Forbes. She was a huge historian back in about the 1900s in California and was a writer. But because she was a woman at that time, if she was writing about this, she had to use the pseudonym Harry Forbes. Well, she created what was called this California Federations of Women's Clubs. And she wanted to preserve the history of the Spanish missions because she found a lot of them were deteriorating. So she organized what was called the California Bell Company, coming up with these towering bells, 90 pounds each, and would put them up to mark what was El Camino Real. And as a result, it helped to preserve the heritage and the history of this route. I would love to come back to California at some point and visit a church at one of these 21 Spanish missions, because even just hearing a skimmed history of this, like, I want to learn more. You may want to put on your nerd glasses for this portion of the video. For myself, being an outsider to the Roman Catholic faith, and now having attended 3 separate Latin Mass services in addition to over 24 Catholic churches, but also to see a wide range of YouTube comments in the past, my curiosity into Latin Mass has grown. I've mentioned in prior videos how I reflected, maybe is a way of saying it, because it would involve all different senses when you would attend a liturgy. And with Latin Mass, because you don't quite understand the language, as opposed to native languages where you see with modern liturgy within the Catholic Church, there was this mystery, this tapping into the spiritual realm that I wasn't used to. So as a result, I actually kind of preferred Latin Mass. So a part of me is trying to kind of piece together what's going on within the Catholic faith, because when I would attend Latin Mass, it's a very small subset, but that subset is just very much more loyal, maybe just much more stronger in their faith. I don't know how quite to communicate and explain it, but it makes me wonder, with the restrictions that Pope Francis has enforced on Latin Mass, and also just what came as a result of the Second Vatican Council, in this current society, in this current age, especially politically, with the partisan divides, if we're starting to see this very slow schism within the Catholic Church. I'm not a Catholic, so I can't really say for sure. This is just what I'm starting to maybe see from an outsider perspective, because you have this old Latin Mass, which to me feels very conservative and almost kind of rebellious in a way, to stick with the old ways as opposed to what is being reformed and progressed and moved with the current state of moving liturgy to the state that it is right now. I was pulling up all kinds of stats, and the biggest one was from the Pew Research Center. In this past April just had a huge number of statistics and analysis, especially comparing white U.S. Catholics to Hispanic U.S. Catholics. And one thing that I had read from a Gallup poll is in 1958, 4 years before the Second Vatican Council, the average attendance of Catholics attending Mass was at an all-time high of 75%. And then as years progressed after the Second Vatican Council, that attendance has continually dipped and chopped to the point where now, as of the last April 2024 Pew Research study, 28% of Catholics are attending church on a weekly basis. To go from 75 in 1958 to 28% in 2024 is startling for a decrease. And what Pew Research showed is there is a shift. There's a shift in U.S. demographics within the Catholic faith. Meanwhile, Catholic churches who hold Latin Mass are reporting that their attendance is going up. Now, granted, adherence to Latin Mass, it's a very small subset of practicing Catholics. But here at St. Vitus Catholic Church in San Fernando, California, where it is 93% Hispanic, they purchased this church building in 2018, and immediately this building is too small for those who are coming here. So I want to say their church building maybe could seat 100 people, but for the Mass that I attended, the congregation was 3 to 4 times bigger than what could have fit inside that building. And that was just one of 4 Masses during that day. So for me as an outsider, I'm seeing all these young families. I'm seeing all the women wearing, the veils over their heads. Everyone is responding to the priest in Latin. And you just have a lot of people who are kneeling and genuinely reflecting as the service progresses. So it makes me wonder if Latin Mass is attracting more of an audience. Is this a rejection of Pope Francis's sweeping restrictions on Latin Mass from 2021? And also if it's a rejection of the Second Vatican Council and all those religious reforms from back in the day. This past April, the Pew Research Center released some fresh data points on some interesting trends among Catholicism in the U.S. And I'm going to put some of their charts up here, but they found that the Catholic population right now is 57% white, 33% Hispanic. Since 2007, the white Catholics have gone down by 8 percentage points, whereas Hispanic Catholics are actually trending upward by 4%. Not only that, but you're also seeing a big-time generational shift right now, because over 2/3 of U.S. white Catholics are over the age of 50, whereas U.S. Hispanic Catholics, over 57%, are under the age of 49 years old. And this also is quite interesting in regards to by regions. So 80% of white U.S. Catholics are living in the Midwest, also a big portion in the Northeast. When it comes to the South, right now that's 49% white Catholic, 40% Hispanic Catholic. But then you look into the West, and it's almost doubled right now with Hispanic Catholics at 55% to 30%. So again, this is where things are beginning to shift, not fast, but over time you're seeing this begin to make a mark within Catholicism in the States. One of the most startling data points that they showed, though, was political affiliation by ethnicity and how that has corresponded, especially to the favorability of Pope Francis, especially on a political level. So they showed that 60% of U.S. white Catholics lean Republican, while conversely 60% of U.S. Hispanic Catholics lean Democrat. So when it comes to the favorability of Pope Francis, right now his favorability has dipped to 75%. It's the second lowest it's ever been. But when you look at when he first took over as Pope in 2013, he had 84% favorability among Republicans. That number has plummeted to 63%. Whereas with Democrats' favorability of Pope Francis, it started actually below Republicans. I want to say it was 77%, and now that has gone up to 89%. So it's been a complete flip-flop in very stark different directions for Pope Francis. I would love to hear your comments below, because the whole idea for why Pope Francis issued these sweeping restrictions on Latin Mass in the first place was to create unity within Catholicism. And as I look at these data points and I see this growing divide between conservatives and progressives, especially within the Catholic faith, like I'm beginning to wonder if Latin Mass is like this partisan push for conservatives, especially just kind of seeing Latin Mass where everyone is much more respectful and much more traditional. And that is evident just with the women wearing the veils, and just when it comes to social matters, like how they are more reverent during the service as compared to what I've seen at other type of Catholic services. So again, would love your comments on this. because even Pew Research, after Pope Francis issued these 2021 restrictions on Latin Mass, Pew Research showed that only 1/3 of Catholics had even heard about this. And of that 1/3, there wasn't a true majority of where everyone felt about that. So again, would love your comments. Is Latin Mass a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it turning too political? What do you think? We're going to wrap it up on that. Hope you enjoyed church number 10, looking into St. Vitus Catholic Church in San Fernando, California. For our next trip, I headed out east through Pennsylvania, New York, and Ohio. And our next visit is going to take a look at the Flight 93 Memorial Chapel in Pennsylvania. This chapel was designed for the victims of Flight 93 from 9/11. That's going to be a fascinating video. Make sure to like and subscribe to stay tuned for future visits. But until next time, hope you have a good one.